On this episode of China Uncensored, the US and China are getting along again. And we have this guy to thank. Hi, welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Something pretty incredible has happened, folks. The United Nations Security Council all agreed on something and actually got something done. That means the United States, Russia, and China found something they all had in common, besides that they're each the best and greatest country in the world. Last Saturday, the UN Security Council unanimously voted on tough new sanctions against North Korea. It's part of ongoing efforts to stop North Korea from making nuclear weapons. Not only is this newsworthy, it's Twitter-worthy. Yes, China and Russia voted with us on these sanctions, and they cover more than $1 billion in exports, including coal, iron, lead, and seafood, meaning North Korea can't sell those things abroad. Of course, that just means all that seafood stays in North Korea, which makes Kim Jong Un happy because he's on a strict seafood diet. When he sees food, he eats it. The sanctions also prohibit expanding the use of North Korean laborers abroad, along with new joint ventures or new investment in current joint ventures. Though if you think North Korea is a good investment, you might want to get a new financial advisor. In practical terms, the sanctions mainly affect how Russia and China deal with North Korea. Those two countries are basically the only major powers doing business with the Kim regime. China makes up about 90% of all North Korean trade. According to Bloomberg, the US and China had been negotiating the sanctions for a month. Then a leak last week said US President Trump wanted to go after China on trade for failing to rein in North Korea. And he even got support from Democrats on it, a rare bipartisan win. But days later, news broke that the US was going to delay the trade battle to guarantee China's support for the UN vote on North Korea's sanctions, which shows how important the North Korea situation is to the US government. This is a win-win. The US gets cooperation from China on North Korea without starting a trade war. And even though China will take the brunt of the loss in terms of trade, it's great PR. It makes it seem like China is part of the solution, not part of the problem. It also prevents the US from putting more sanctions on Chinese companies with dubious ties to North Korea, for now at least. North Korea, for its part, has not taken the sanctions well. As their perpetually angry state-run news anchor said,
"We denounce and totally reject the United Nations Security Council resolution on our country, which the United States and hostile forces have fabricated to infringe on our sovereignty."
Then North Korea threatened ultimate measures, saying that the entire United States was in reach of their nuclear weapons.
There is no bigger mistake than the United States believing that its land is safe across the ocean.
After the sanctions announcement, China and North Korea's foreign ministers met on the sidelines of an ASEAN summit.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Li told reporters he had urged the North Koreans to calmly handle the resolutions and, quote, not do anything unbeneficial towards the international community.
Yes, we wouldn't want anything unbeneficial happening, but there's a problem here. I mean, besides the rogue regime threatening to nuke the world. The problem is that China and the United States see that problem in fundamentally different ways.
China says it's confident that new UN sanctions on North Korea will bring the rogue state back to the negotiating table.
The negotiating table? The United States is not going to the negotiating table with an authoritarian regime with an obscene human rights record that consistently shows itself to be a belligerent threat to other countries. Unless it's China, or Russia, or North Korea 10 years ago. The point is, the US doesn't want North Korea to think it can get what it wants through bombastic threats. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said the US won't sit down for talks with North Korea until it stops its nuclear and ballistic missile tests for an undisclosed but significant amount of time. The Chinese regime sees it differently. They see the United States as provoking North Korea. My favorite state-run media, the Global Times, calls it U.S. moral arrogance. both sides just need to have a heart-to-heart discussion.
Of course, we also urge other parties, especially the U.S. and South Korea, not to increase the tension. The situation on the Korean Peninsula is at a critical point of crisis. At the same time, it is at a turning point to make a decision to resume talks.
Maybe not so ironically, this is the same line North Korea takes. Well, the U.S. is to blame part, not the let's have a heart-to-heart discussion part.
We want to make it clear that the worsening tension on the Korean Peninsula, as well as the nuclear issues, were caused by the United States.
But with these sanctions in place, what could realistically be done to de-escalate the situation? Well, China suggests the U.S. could get rid of the THAAD missile defense system protecting South Korea from a northern attack. I mean, that's totally reasonable, right? It absolutely wouldn't have anything to do with China being worried THAAD could threaten Chinese missile strikes in the future, especially if, say, the United States does strike the North Korean regime and suddenly there are U.S. troops on China's borders. But don't worry, I'm sure the U.S. won't strike North Korea.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
Don't worry, though. According to Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, that was just President Trump speaking to North Korea in language that Kim Jong Un can understand. And North Korea proved Kim understood that language by saying that they would attack the U.S. territory of Guam with enveloping fire by launching missiles. You guys, they're speaking the same language. They're having a heart-to-heart talk. Seriously though, the most recent UN sanctions are a good start to dealing with North Korea's nuclear threats, an increasingly complicated issue that makes everyone look back fondly on the simple days when Kim Jong-il would just stand around looking at stuff. That's another thing the US, China, and Russia can all agree on. Coming up after the break, the Chinese Communist Party has come up with a novel way to eliminate poverty. You know, maybe that movie, Red Dawn, can still happen. In case it does, you'll want to see every episode of China Uncensored as soon as possible. This segment was part of our full half-hour episode that you could have seen earlier. Go to ChinaUncensored.tv to catch full-length episodes every Friday.